How's it going?
Good.
Good. Which side is the banging come from? Is that you, Leonardo?
Yeah, I think yes. I'm going to mute my phone.
I reckon so. Yeah. Any other banging is probably me. We are in our warehouse right now, and we share it with loads and loads of people. So there's this like giant lift that just if you press the button and the doors open, alarms go off in the whole place. So it's not ideal, but it's all we've got, I'm afraid. Yeah, we're in our very fancy warehouse space, which is not very fancy at all, but it does the job. So yeah, you guys. I mean, I haven't been listening, but you guys have been chatting, right? So have you
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want to do that thing where everyone introduces themselves. It's kind of just reminds me of being at school. So yeah, I just I recognize some of your names. I think I recognize all of your names. And I know I've got like unanswered questions for you, Ruby. But you sent like a couple of really nice emails.
Yeah.
So I guess this is just like for those. I get like asked quite a lot of questions about stuff, and I get it because I'm always asking people questions. And at some point, like we like leveled up to the point where the people we can ask questions of are like higher up than us. Like when we were in shows in Paris or in production places or traveling, and that's like, I don't know, such a great privilege for us. And I get to ask questions on a friendly time basis, but like getting to that level was so fucking hard to like, I don't know. And I remember being at uni and trying to get people to help me with certain projects and stuff. Like nobody wants to know. And I when we started Story, I was like, we're definitely not going to be like that, because it seems kind of like mean spirited to not answer people and to not provide like some like I guess like kind of community give back, etc. But at some point it just becomes like really like a lot, and the questions are really similar, and I don't know, it breeds this kind of like thing where I'm like, oh, I wish they would just look at the website, or I don't know. But it's really unfair, and it's really important, I think, for brands and companies or individuals or whatever to like disseminate some of the information they've got, because I don't know, it's just very, 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 very difficult out there, and like very like full of polarizing views and like very extreme views about what you should and shouldn't do, and it's very not like that as far as I can tell. It's very I mean, the word spectrum is used so much, but there really is just like a spectrum of things, and like so I guess anything I say should be taken as just like our experience of things, because when we started, we'd ask questions of like retailers and other factories and people, and they would say, absolutely, you have to do it this way, or absolutely, you have to do this thing this way, or opinions, whatever. And then a lot of them turned out not to be true. So I really want to avoid saying that. I suppose the only thing that I would say is true is that like there is really no one good, like one hard and fast rule. It's just like, sometimes if you want to do like the right thing, that it is much more challenging, but then also much more rewarding. Like I haven't come into a situation yet where the fight wasn't like the result wasn't worth all the effort. Maybe like each individual thing, sometimes things don't work, sometimes things do, but like overall it does. Hello. Hi, Jenny. I think you got your mic off.
Oh yeah. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi.
Or good afternoon.
Hi. You didn't miss much. It was just like a ramble. But yes, this is all recorded, so I'll put this up afterwards too.
Awesome.
Like I said in the email. So I think that we'll just take turns alphabetically. So I have to do, so it'd be Colin, then Jenny, then Leonardo, then Michael, then Ruby. So I guess, do you want to just like ask questions or talk about stuff, and then we can like, I don't know, chat about it. I'll tell you what my experience is of something, and you guys, I guess, can like put your hand up if you've got anything to add.
Sure.
So we'll start with Colin.
I'm most interested in when you guys were first starting, like before you moved production to India, how you were able to find a manufacturer that you like agreed with ethically at first, like for your first few production runs. Like, what was that process like?
One thing we actually were making in India from like the very first start.
Oh, really? Okay.
Fabric, like in terms of like fabric and that kind of things, but like the make was here in the UK. The thing that I always hear said about making stuff locally, and I think that it is true, is that you get to like have eyes on something. Finding manufacturers, I think it is to this day like maddeningly difficult. They often don't. There's no directory of places you can go. A lot of brands have to like essentially like have to commit like sort of like corporate espionage to try and like go through and try and work out where people make stuff and like find names, and then really all you're left with is like a few factories that people like to talk about because they've got like a heritage or their own like name, etc. The first people we worked with was one of those. Was a company in the UK called Cookson and Clegg. They made our first run of jeans. We found them because of a recommendation from another brand. Said that they hadn't worked with them because they're too expensive, but they're very, very specific about the way they make, and they've got these machines that we wanted to use, machines that created like on our first run of jackets that we still have. Actually, we still have those. There's buttons that are removable, so on the outside there's the buttonhole, and on the inside there's like a eyelet, but it's a sewn eyelet, and there's only a few. It's a special type of machine, and a few places have it. Anyway, they have it, so we really had to work with them. But to answer your like the meat of your question, really, just having to like go somewhere. We probably hear a lot about big companies being duped and like finding out, oh shit, they're actually working with a factory that's got slaves in it or what have you, even though they're sending people to these companies. But that's like a very big scale problem. I think, like, if we're really pragmatic about the issue, if you work with a local tailor or find a local factory and you go and visit, you'll see basically everything that there is to see. Like these types of operations are not gonna it's not worth it to hide stuff. They're usually more expensive anyway. However, there have been situations when we worked in the UK where a company has like shown and told us that they're basically using slave labor, and then you just don't work with them, and I don't know, I guess you just finding a factory, I guess it's two things, but finding a factory is really hard. However, I would always urge, if you're a small scale person, to find a tailor or like an alterations person. Most places in the West and even more prevalent elsewhere, there'll be a place that, like a dry cleaners or something, that has a tailor in there or someone that can do that kind of work. And they may not be an all-rounder, like almost nobody is. The first time we made a jacket was with a tailor that does work in like alterations for stuff, but she couldn't pattern cut. But she did like a goodish job at doing the first one, and then we just kept refining. And not everything needs like a pattern cutter and a garment tech and a blah 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 blah. You can do quite a lot with like what you have to hand. And there's just so many people who are not like on the platform that you can get to, but are just like really near you. Alterations people, etc. These tend to, in my experience, I might be wrong, but these tend to be like stay-at-home mums and people like in the family of the dry cleaning business that that are like extremely highly skilled at this like niche of like sewing alterations, or even you might even find things like hand embroidery or darning and stuff. But they're inaccessible. They're invisible. So there's this like very like this undercurrent of people that are amazing to work with. One of the visions for Story at the beginning was to like create a network with these people. It's completely impractical for us. But up until autumn winter 17, we were doing everything with a tailor on that level. We would do it was one lady, and then when we got bigger production runs in, she would bring her sister on board who she would just do the cutting and stuff, like the less skilled stuff. And at that point, we then started working in Thailand and then in India. One last thing I'll say, some like weird advice that we got from a guy who doesn't have a fashion brand, but he had a really successful fashion store. He was saying that the one thing that he wished people told him was to work with what you've got until like physically you can't do it anymore, until it like hurts, until that tailor can't, like our tailor could not do anymore. She didn't want to do anymore. She was like, I'm done. Like this is the most, I can only do 30 of these jackets for you at a time. I can only do etc. 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 And then at that point we just like graduate up, and she still wanted to work with us on a different thing, and we on a different what's called basis. So no one's like left behind, but I don't know if that helps, but that's where we maybe we'll do like a follow-up bit as well, in case I've like done what I always do and rambled on the wrong thing, or if I covered everything.
No, that did. Yeah. I mean,
okay. Okay, cool. So, Jenny.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I feel like recently I've been kind of in a rut, I guess, creatively. I'm from Los Angeles, but I'm at home in Chicago temporarily and unemployed because of COVID and all that. So I've had a lot of time to like think and reflect about like my career path. But as someone that's kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none, how do you kind of navigate all of these interests that I want to pursue into an actual career path? Like, how did you guys decide that like Story MFG was something that you guys were going to pursue, I guess?
I think that we just did. I don't know. This is such a get out answer, but we just didn't. Like we kind of viewed it as like a little project, and if it worked, then we would devote some more time with it, and then if it didn't, we wouldn't. And then that thinking, I think we start putting on like everything else in the business. Like so when we started, like a very, very short thing, we were like we're going to make one pair of jeans, and we were going to pre-sell them because we've got no money to friends and family and people who've seen out, who are interested in like what we're doing. We didn't have any money, so we didn't have any. I bought the website name, but we didn't have any money or sort of knowledge to actually make a website, something that's much easier now. So we just put a mailing list link up, and then people could add to the mailing list, and then we would every time we had an update, we would just email them. I suppose what we were doing was almost deliberately following like a Kickstarter type path, and Kickstarter was around, but we didn't want to join Kickstarter because at the time there were so many Kickstarter brands, especially like denim ones, starting up. And I don't know, it just felt like if you were a Kickstarter brand, it kind of like branded you that thing, and we didn't want to be that. It felt very cheap, and etc. etc. So we followed like all of those things of like being very open, like if you want to join in, etc. But we always said, if this doesn't work, then we'll just do another thing. I think that I've always been very mindful of this idea of desire lines, like when like there's this very famous picture of this college campus that got snowed over, so that all of the all of the pathways were covered, and then someone took pictures of where people walked from class to class, and I think that the pathways were like completely different to the ones designed by humans, but the ones walked by humans, like with no direction, were like showed like the easiest way to get from A to B, and that like path of least resistance, while I don't agree with like following it for like ethical stuff, when it comes to like actually like where we put our energies, sometimes we put so much energy into something and it's just a failure and it just doesn't work. Like we have so many failures. And again, although I don't really like a lot of like Silicon Valley, like TED Talk, like shiny speak, one thing that they often talk about is like enjoying failure, and I still don't really enjoy it, but you do embrace it and you think, okay, well, that didn't work. That's either gonna be something for the future or we're gonna leave it behind. So when someone says that they want to start a brand or want to start a business, what I'd really love to say to them is like, just have very low expectations. It seems kind of mean, but of course, I'm not a very good sample size. Everyone I know that has had low expectations has done much better because they've depleted less of their energy and they have more to go with. If we were the type of people that got so invested, I mean, we really had some really bad, like some massive flops, both like financially and design wise and etc. And if we really let that go, we wouldn't have story. We almost two times we've almost just like rolled up the brand because we were so well, it was mostly me, so like emotionally drained. I'm like, this is not worth all of the stuff we're putting into it for a pair of shoes or you know, whatever it was. Sorry, I've just dropped my headphone out. But to your other point about being like master of none, you won't be like, you'll have like so many transferable skills. Everything. I don't have a lot of the skills that are needed to do stuff in story. Katia has the other third, and then the rest comes from, you know, outside from people like we collaborate with. But you'll find your thing, and everybody just needs to find, if they want to, of course no one has to do a business, but everybody needs to find their niche. Like, it's not easy to like delineate exactly what that niche is, but when you find it, you'll find that there's a market out there for everybody that also shares your niche, and that's who you'll speak to. And then it'll grow or it won't grow. It might be that I don't know, it could be that you're desperately trying to find a Pikachu backpack that is vegan or something, and there'll be millions of other people out there that are also interested in that same particular thing. And yeah, it just I think the biggest work is just like actually trying to discover your own tastes, if that makes sense. Like, we're just always shown all these things like, oh, that's good, that's bad, that's good, and then when you actually try and make something, like, is it good? Do I like that? I don't. That's the real challenge. So yeah, low expectations. Try and find something you enjoy. But I guess lastly, that whole notion of, if you find something you enjoy, you'll never work a day. That's not been my experience. There's still very hard work and you still enjoy it, but you enjoy it in a different way. And I'm not the type of person that enjoys work. I hate it. I don't like to be up early. I don't like stress. I think that in every way that we can reduce stress from other people in the business is like good for me as well. But then Katie she's quite happy to work up until like she falls asleep. I hate that. I have to. Yeah. Does that answer any of it?
Yeah, that actually does really help me out. It inspires me. Thank you.
What kind of thing are you thinking about doing?
Well, I've been going to school for animation. Currently not in school though, but also really interested in like fashion, and worked at a retailer that like a sneaker retailer in LA. But I don't know.
There'll be
Sorry,
something.
I don't know.
mean, you don't have to know. I didn't know either. My personal thing is I went to school for linguistics. I didn't do anything design wise, but I was always interested in fashion. And up until like relatively recently, I kept saying that my degree was a complete waste of time and money. Although I enjoyed it, enjoyed like the social aspects of it, etc. But it's just occurred to me recently, like how important it was, and like all of these like transferable skills that you get. Like there was a lot of like there's a lot of stuff that is embedded in a story that's part of my linguistics degree. I mean, we learned a lot about like cultural sensitivity. We learned a lot about how important languages are, how important art is, how important things are. Also, the way that we learn about language, the way that we record things, like that, that's all like very strongly part of story, and some part of your animation, even if you hate it, I'm not saying you do, you might, I didn't like a lot of thingy, there'll be some like Venn diagram where that middle bit is like your thing, and it'll be like perfect, and no one else will be able to like capture that market as well as you either, because it won't be as authentic, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Welcome. Leonardo.
So, I don't know if the hammering is too loud. I can send the question written.
I'm sure it's fine. We're not fancy.
Okay.
It's fine.
My one question, I have others, obviously, but in your last essay that you were writing about the cost of handcrafted goods, and you wrote about the kinds of sustainable approaches, like the ancient craft and the more innovation-wise technologic. And I was thinking, I don't know, when you guys starting a sustainable brand, I imagine you have to make concessions about which way you want to base your design practice. Like, okay, I want to go to, you guys went to natural dyed and materials and ancient craft. But in my case, I'm thinking about working with antique textiles, recycled fabric, secondhand market, and all these ways, these pathways of sustainable designing. And my question is, how did you decided, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that? Does it relate to your background or to Katie's? That is my big question. And if you want to work with another design approaches, like, I don't know, I seen you talked about in the essays about the slow tech part of story, little project.
We are probably just like everybody. We've got like a lot of interests, and like we appreciate a lot of other people's work and a lot of other people's things. Right at the start of story, we were like, actually, we had seen some 100% recycled denim, and it just looked like extremely interesting. It was like, it had a lot of character, and so we were actually going that direction more. And at sort of like twin junctions, before I'd met Katie, I had traveled in a few places, but Vietnam was one, and I'd seen an indigo vat, and well, I didn't know very much about it, but it was like very impressive, and it was I guess it was like, to me, in my mind, it was a bit like visiting like a whiskey distillery. I was like, that's an interesting experience. And then we were at we met a dude who was Indian, and he was like, oh, have you heard of this thing? And it was about natural dyes. I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, I've heard of it. And I'd actually recently just seen like this video of a big Japanese denim mill who'd made like a £2,000 pair of jeans, and they were naturally dyed and hand woven and stuff. And he was like, this stuff is not that expensive, and it's part of this cultural outreach program we're doing. Why don't you check it out? And it was so good. It was like we'd found like this golden egg kind of thing. It was so good that we spent all of our money on flights like 2 weeks later to go out and meet the guy. and then go and meet all the villagers making this stuff, etc. But even then, and up until recently, we were like, we also want to do like recycled stuff. We have in the past done like recycled fabrics and recycled synthetics. We also want to do new recycled stuff. We also want to do upcycle stuff. We want to use unusual materials. One like much closer goals. We want to use like a lot more cotton alternatives, or perhaps not cotton alternatives, but heirloom cottons that are more regenerative. We want to do, I mean, there's so much stuff we want to do, but I feel like it's very hard when you're at the start, because you want to show the world what your POV is, and you want to say this is what I'm about, but you really only get a very like thin slice of, and then after that you get to like spread it out. So the people that saw our first bits we did were like mostly like denim people, and then when we brought out the next product, which wasn't a pair of jeans, they felt betrayed, and then the I guess the company like retracted in terms of following, and then we put out another thing, and it was even further removed. And like as our work like grew, people started to understand us a bit more, and maybe we're not just about jeans, or maybe we're not just about this, or maybe we're not just about that. And then more recently, as in the last 2 years, we'd like brought out a women's wear collection, which I suspect most people thought would just be our clothes on women, and they was like dresses and stuff like that. And then like lots of people felt annoyed, and lots of other people felt really excited, because it was like they're starting to like read more of our dictionary, which obviously we innately know and not people can't see. The way that I see it though, and the way that I explain it to people often, is that we tend to view this really as a project. And when you see our first collection, it was just one fabric, it was just denim, and then it was 3 styles. It was like a jacket, and then a jean. Actually, it was 2 jackets and a jean. And it was essentially just one denim, and then a few colors. So there was a few options of things you could buy. And then we managed to do some shirting, and so then we had 2 denims and then 2 shirting options. And then as we picked up new crafts and new people to work with, and new tools, or new like pieces of our own language, the collection in our work just started to like get higher and higher definition, and started to grow. Like it's like a language. I mean, again, I'm referring to linguistics, but like the way that languages evolve are like, you have the generation that invent the basic terms, and then the children improve on them, and then improve until you get this very, very complicated, amazing expression of all these things. And then every generation it grows just a little bit more, and so sort of like secretly, not secretly, we try and get one new piece of our language with each collection. So back in like SS18, it was the first time we did block prints, so suddenly we had block prints in there. This last season was the first time we were able to do hand knit, and then we've got loads of hand knit in there. And then before that it was crochet, and before that it was embroidery, and before that, but then now what we've got is like collections that have got hand knit, hand embroidery, hand dye, hand weaving, hand thingy, hand, like all of the like bits. But my ultimate fear with all of these things is that we'll start working with people and then not work with them next season. Like that's something that I can't abide. So we always have to like tread very carefully when we do these things. Of course, we have to stop working with people sometimes, but rather not leave people in the lurch by getting excited about something, it not working, and then, you know what I mean. 1 second, sorry. Is that you? One thing that I would say about upcycling is this is just my feeling, I may be like completely wrong, but there's a lot of brands taking this route where they find old antique fabrics and then remaking stuff out of them. I think in some cases that's interesting and good, and in some cases you're kind of I think that there's going to be I feel like there might be some kind of backlash against a lot of this stuff, because a lot of the time it's destroying like quite culturally important stuff. It's not always just like a homespun naive rug. Sometimes it's some stuff that's quite important, and without knowing everything about the thing, you might end up doing something that you'd be upset with yourself, something that's quite damaging. So that's something we've always avoided, because I think there are good and bad ways to do that kind of stuff always, but it's like big brain situation. I can't always work it out myself. But yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, definitely. And this expansion of the story universe, that you had to start with something and then expand the language.
Yeah,
that helped a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that like you got to go slow. Like, it's so upsetting. It's such a tragedy. Of course, some people just start a thing and they find instant success. We've been going for 8 years in August, or 7 years, 7 or 8 years, and we only just started paying ourselves a salary like in the last year. We've only got 2 people directly like employed in our company. One of them just came in and left. It's slow going. It's very slow, but equally during those years I've seen loads of people go up and down and go and disappear, and we're still going, I guess, because we have got low expectations. And grow slowly, like really slowly, like as slowly as I think you can go without boring yourself, because that's also something that can happen. I see people like let stuff sit with them and then they just constantly think, oh, maybe I should do this. Yeah. Okay. Michael.
Hi, Saeed.
Hi.
And this is Mike. So we just wanted to start off by saying that this year has probably lent a new meaning for the word difficult for you. So thank you so much for sharing your energy and your knowledge with us. And congratulations on the latest collection.
Cheers. We've got women's wear preview. I think we're going to post about it after I finished with this. So we got some new stuff too.
Yeah. So to give you a bit of context about where this interview could be reproduced and useful for us, we're writing a book titled The Future is Fungi to be published with Thames and Hudson in London. And it's a design and lifestyle book. So as a lot of us have been seeing through pop culture, like Alice in Wonderland and Super Mario Kart, mushrooms is a really big theme. So it could be the mystery or beauty of mushrooms that appeal to these designers, but we just want to understand to you and Katie and Story what mushrooms mean to you and if it signifies anything.
I guess there's a couple of things. One is there's like there's the aesthetic, obviously. Mushrooms speak to this like 60s 70s counterculture movement where LSD and magic mushrooms were being passed around and celebrated and that kind of stuff, and like all of that symbology, it's like connected to a lot more stuff like other countercultural movements, etc. But more and bands, obviously. The stuff when I started loving mushrooms is I started collecting bootleg Grateful Dead and Allman Brothers t-shirts when I only had 1 or 2 until I was until recently, but I started collecting them when I was a teenager. And the most like special ones were like the hoodie that you're wearing were like these like very like odd things where someone's got like a white t-shirt and they've just like drawn a mushroom here, and the drawing is terrible, but that's what like makes it so lovely. It's like clearly not gifted illustrator having a go. And anyway, so mushrooms in that sense were like, they seem to mark like a time in history where things seemed more progressive than they are now, even though obviously like most people who are interested in that kind of stuff weren't there at the time, and in many ways it wasn't more progressive. We didn't have the oversight that we do now on a lot of issues that we'd like to talk about, but it speaks to like almost like a thought tribe of people. Like mushrooms are almost a political statement, and that connects to the second one, that like I think that we all understand really when we talk about mushrooms, we're really talking about drugs, and we're talking about natural drugs. And for anybody that is not necessarily pro drugs, but pro being like pro legalization of that kind of stuff, I think takes the view that it is absolutely fucking mental that a natural substance can be illegal. And like, it's so interesting that this thing that grows on Earth can be against the laws that we make up in society. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. It's just like a thing that we all agree. Like, oh, okay, yeah, of course it's illegal, but it's just like grows out of the ground without any interference. So it's just very like challenging idea that a gun, for example, might be legal, and that this like natural thing is legal. The other thing about mushrooms is that I guess like space and the sea, once you go past your dinner plate and you start to find out just a little bit about it, you realize how little we know, and how how interesting of how a mushroom is not a vegetable like everybody assumes.
Yeah.
How how different it is, and how like mind-blowing, how your mind can be completely blown by something so normal and everyday and pedestrian in this world. To me and Katie, it's like everything with story. Like, we, on the face of it, we're like, oh, we understand this thing. On first passing of a subject, we're like, okay, so natural indigo is from a plant, and then you kind of think, okay, well, it's some combination of putting a plant in water and boiling it and putting fabric in there or something. And of course it's not like that at all, and the like science and everything and all of the practice is completely fucking but mental. And mushrooms are like that. Someone would be like, oh, do you know the biggest living thing on this planet is a mushroom, and it's like the size of a whole forest. You're like, what? And do you know that yeah, there's something so alluring about it, because I also think that for like most people, perhaps not on the drug sense, but for most people, we all have this like innate belief that the cures for most of our ills are like it's somewhere locked in nature, whether you believe it because of evolution or because of religion. And that every time there's a forest fire, we're like, oh, maybe the cure for cancer has been burnt away and whatever. And like mushrooms present this like big open question mark, like what do we not know yet about them? Yeah, I guess mushrooms are like, if I had to distill it in one thing, and not to be like overly poetic, but mushrooms present it's even symbologically to present like a lot of promise, like both like this like political and countercultural symbology, and also like what can they provide medicine and humanity and hedonism, all that kind of stuff. I have to say, like the amount of like mushrooms being like printed on like everything is even starting to put me off. But yeah, I guess that's what mushrooms. Also, me and Katie fucking love mushrooms. They're so delicious. We eat them all the time. As vegans, like, as just like a one last PS, there's so many good meat alternatives with mushrooms, and they're so difficult. There's so many excellent mushrooms that are so rare and exotic. They're like meats. Like you can only get them if they're foraged and they grow on a dead wood of some specific tree, or they grow out the back of a dead bug, and you have to go looking for these bugs. It's very like, yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
I did have a question in regards to the design process and when you design with mushrooms.
Yeah.
Are you guys the designers? Do you guys work with artists? Is there an approach that you guys take in every collection when you start to kind of involve mushrooms?
The first few mushroom bits, I think I did myself. Like myself and Katie, because part of the thing that we love is like naive art, but at some point you have to get artists involved. We always get artists involved because that's part of our brand DNA. We love that kind of thing. It feels very special to have somebody working on something for you. But also, aside from the very like great community building type thing, it's also very important when you start to grow as a company to own the copyright of the thing that you're doing. We actually don't own that. I've said that wrong. To be working with somebody that owns the copyright of the work, because we had a situation in a country where someone was copying our stuff, and because the artist had made it and we had the copyright for it, we could do something about it. If we were to use something that was public domain, or something, then we wouldn't be protected. This is just like a really shitty legal annoying thing that I didn't even know about, but I'm so glad that we do now. I don't know what it's like all around the world, but in the UK, the moment that a person does something, like creates something, they instantly own the copyright. There's no like registration needed or anything. It's automatic. I think in other countries it might be different, but the guy who someone was using our logo actually, and that was created by a friend of mine who's an artist, and because he owned the copyright, the lawyer was able to do something about it. It's just very important, not because we wanted to sue somebody or anything, which we didn't and we aren't, but it's just to assert that belongs to you, and you don't, the person using it doesn't represent it. But yeah, I guess art, working with artists, doing any kind of brief and working like their interpretation of what a mushroom looks like is always really different. I wonder if I've got anything here. We just sent off our collection to our agent, so I don't think I've got anything to show you. But yeah.
Cool. We'll keep an eye out anyway online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ruby?
Yeah, I'm just super grateful to be a part of this. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
So I've been sewing for a number of years, and I've always used like indie patterns or sometimes vintage patterns, but I've been seeing lately, as with everything, things online get copied and stolen, and you actually just posted about this recently. Some pattern makers that I really love, like their work is, being copied directly into production, which I feel very strongly about. Like that's really bad. But in trying to figure out how to start something of my own, it's like I'm hitting a wall of trying to figure out how to design my own patterns and then, grade them, get them all dialed in and everything, so that someone in theory, I could send them to like a pet sew factory, which is also something that I am trying to educate myself about and know nothing about at this point. But it's like, I'm just curious how you guys go about designing each of the patterns that you do. And are you like sourcing from existing patterns and kind of making like a meld of them together, or are you're working with someone, I imagine, who's doing that for you? And how does that whole process work?
Okay. For anybody that doesn't know what a pattern is, because these kinds of things, like when I started, didn't make sense to me. A pattern to me is like something that's patterned. A pattern is when you've got a garment when a factory is making it, they have like all of the pieces of it cut out in paper or card, and then they put those paper or card on top of the fabric and cut around that to make each piece, and they sew it together. And the pattern tells them like how to sew stuff together. It's like instructions. It's like the IKEA instructions for making a garment. This kind of goes to the other point where I was like, you can kind of just work with what you've got at the time. We don't buy patterns. We've never bought them. When we started, I suggested doing that to Katie. She said that it was an option, but maybe not a perfect option, because and she's right, because you then have to, you get that pattern, then you have to make a toile, which is a very quick and easy version of it, and then you change stuff, and then you change the pattern. So you're kind of like going back and forth. I guess it's like editing something rather than making it from new. We make all of our patterns ourselves, but there's levels to pattern making. Like there are some people who do like pattern making is like an extreme skill. Like it's the kind of thing that you go and study, and you study pretty much only that. And then even after all that, there are good pattern makers and bad pattern makers. And we've worked with both, like good and bad, and then the results are obvious. But there are many people that can do simple patterns, I would say. So like not obviously not everybody, but quite a few tailors we've worked with can make a simple pattern. And by virtue of the kind of stuff we make, our stuff is quite simple and quite anti-fit as well. I guess that's lucky. So this kind of advice won't be helpful if you're trying to like make a dress with ruching on it, or like tailored technical hiking trousers or something. But we would almost always, I would say every time that it's worked for us, we would find a vintage sample of something, and then we would get a pattern cut from that because we like the fit. That's the most important like starting point, is like finding the right fit. And in my experience, it's not worth starting with something where the fit is wrong but something else is right, and then trying to make the fit right. Like you got to try and get the fit right and then go from there. So we would find for a hoodie, for example, that we're working on now, we've got this like extremely oversized 50s hoodie or something. It's like a 7XL, but the fit is what we want, but the sleeves might just need to be shorter, or it needs a drawstring. It needs some like design work, and then we would get a pattern cut of that. Then we'd make a sample of that, and then we would change it from there. I think that you might just be getting like very. You could end up getting very like cyclically thinking and like worrying about stuff. And I find this like, I find that like when people start doing something, they'll focus on one thing, and like be it patterns, or like, oh, I haven't got marketing right, or I haven't got PR, or I haven't got a website, etc., etc., etc. My advice would just be to like find someone that can do a kind of okay job, and then iterate from there. People don't remember your mistakes, I promise you. Like we've made so many terribly fitting things even, and we just iterate. To give you some like, I don't know if this will be encouraging or shocking, this last 6 months is the first time we've actually got a pattern cutter in. Like we're just speaking to her this morning. We've had our sizes graded, but it's all been like, we would have a medium, and then we would be like, okay, this medium is kind of like, I would. It's hard because it's vintage, but I'd find like a medium of something, and I'm like, okay, the large should be 2 inches bigger, and then we would go 2 inches bigger here, there, and everywhere. It's not always right, but a lot of the time it's an approximation of what's right. And when clothes are a bit anti-fit, it kind of doesn't matter that much anyway. But we had some trouble with like some trousers on like one type of trouser that had like a lot of pleating and stuff, in a previous season where everything was working great for a couple of seasons, and then one season like all the legs were slightly too short and we had to remake them. So then we got a pattern cutter in to like really do a real proper tech pack with like crazy measurements and like digital pattern cutting and stuff on a body. But that's new, and that is so fucking expensive, and it only a decent investment for us because we are definitely going to make those trousers for the next 3 or 5 years or something. So I would say if you can't make it yourself, then get somebody who's okay. I think that you also can find local pattern cutters to you. Student pattern cutters and stuff, they're still expensive though, because it's such a niche thing. Like I think that we once used a student pattern cutter for something like non-story related, but that was also fab thing, like for a sub brand we were thinking about doing, and she was like 50 or 70 pounds an hour. It was very expensive, but the jacket was like a tailor jacket, so we had to do it. But yeah, I guess using a pattern that already exists, you're kind of limited to what you can find as well. Whereas if you shop something vintage and then take a pattern from there, you have a bit more. You have a bit more space to stretch out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm interested in zero waste pattern cutting too. So
yeah, that's something that I'm really. That's something I only really learned about. Well, it was before story, but that's I find I might not be up to date on like the newest methods, but I find that it's a very specific look. Like it looks a certain way to pattern cut that way. And if we're talking about the same thing, like grading is almost like not worth doing because it's sort of almost like it's almost always one size.
mm-hmm.
That kind of look. It's still really good and really interesting, but it's quite a divisive like style. Yeah. But I mean, we don't do zero waste pattern cutting, but we do use all of our waste for making these labels and stuff. And I think that there's a lot of focus on waste for good reason, but sometimes waste is not waste. Sometimes waste is waste. Sometimes waste is poison, and sometimes waste is not poison and reusable, and sometimes waste is actually something beneficial. So like all of our waste that isn't turned into paper is composted, and I mean it's not perfect. It'd be amazing if we could just print out the exact things that we need, but it's kind of a cool way to do it. What kind of stuff are you designing?
I've been working on jackets and hats. Actually, I was trying to make a hat out of all natural materials, which was just, I don't know what to use for the brim. If you have any thoughts on that.
For this bit,
yeah.
Well, we've used a type of like recycled plastic. We've used cardboard. Cardboard is actually absolutely amazing for like a lot of things. I think because it's a packing material, etc. We kind of we don't give it enough credit, but there's a lot of cardboards out there. Like the lifespan of a hat or something like this with cardboard in it will last so like longer than the person's going to wear it. What else we used? We've used we've used a lot of unsuccessful stuff, like just like putting layers of canvas. It just like blows backwards in the wind. I think these were recycled plastic. I can't remember exactly. We did a couple of runs of these. I think that if I was going to give anybody any advice on what to start with and they were going to do something fashion, I would say do accessories, because this sizing is much easier. In my experience, people are really like excited to buy accessories because it's not like you can wear a real statement looking thing without like feeling like you're looking foolish, and stores are constantly asking for them. There's so much space in the world for accessories, so usable. It's just not our strong point as a brand. we've one of the two girls that works for us is an accessories designer, and we've just started really getting on it. But man, I wish we had started, because I mean, people make handbag brands or hat brands and just like go stratospheric. They can become iconic so quickly, and it's such an amazing way to use waste. Like I'm with you on making stuff all natural. We do a lot of it, but people demonize plastic and man-made materials because they're put into like single-use bags and you know, clothing that's going to wash, etc., etc. But using plastic materials that are already around to make a bag or a pair of shoes or something that doesn't get washed and has a long lifespan is so good. It's much more durable than a lot of other stuff. It's the right way of thinking about design in my sustainable design, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I think that I think I might have talked about this at one point. We tried to make an all natural shoe. People have done it to use like all natural and also not be like all natural but actually badly processed, but like all natural, and it just like created a shoe that just wasn't very good. I thought that in the end of it. But then we can make a shoe that is like full of stuff that would be used for single waste plastic instead, and like lock it in there somewhere that it isn't going to leach microplastics, and then it's like a big chunk. It can be recycled afterwards, and then we've made a thing that design wise is quite clever, and yeah, and it goes to that other point about like people, like after we first made something that wasn't jeans, people were annoyed. I'm sure when we start making stuff that is not completely natural, and we do stuff that's made of man-made materials and shoes, and we're working with a couple of trainer companies at the moment, people are going to be like feel like betrayed. But that's always been our language. Maybe people just haven't seen it yet, and I think that maybe they'll see it as a compromise, even though it's not. It's just we haven't had access to that kind of material before. But I don't know.
To demonize it, but you're just talking about strategic use of all your materials, which is the most important.
I think that exactly, yeah. And man, it's so hard to not get locked into this like worry of what other people are going to think.
Yes.
I want to tell people all the time not to think about that, but I constantly do. I constantly worry about it. I worry about it every single day. Worry about like, I think it's like a symptom of being a good being like trying to be on the right side of stuff. To be like, oh my god, am I going to get cancelled because of, I don't know, this, that, or the other? I've said something the wrong way. I've had experiences already with Story where people have got extremely fucked off about stuff. But yeah, at the end of it, we're just doing our thing, and yeah. I think that I missed the question before from Leonardo, which was about this, which was, are we going to do any of this man-made material type stuff? I'd love to. We just don't have access to it at the moment. We're working with, I think I've already mentioned it on Instagram, so I'm sure it's fine. Reebok, who we're doing a shoe with, and that opens up like a lot of stuff we wouldn't be able to do for shoes. And then we're working with another shoe company for later in the year, and that's opened up even more stuff. I don't know if any of you have had experience of like trying to contact fabric companies and stuff, but they don't fucking answer you because you're not big enough to care. You're more trouble than you're worth to work with. So, and that just still happens to us. Like, I think some people think we're a lot bigger than we are, but like, I probably, I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said that 99% of the emails I send out aren't answered, because companies have got big corporate accounts. There's a company that makes a bioplastic from plants that is great for outdoor products, for making waterproofs, and I really want to use it, and they won't answer me because they've got a contract with, I don't know, Patagonia or somebody, and they just can't be bothered with us. Yeah, so it's still a struggle. Has anyone got any like follow-up questions or anything? Okay, Jenny.
Okay. I know you touched on upcycling. It's something that I see a lot in a lot a lot of good and a lot of bad, like a lot of shitty
Yeah.
upcycling stuff on Instagram, especially.
Yeah.
What can you like go into a little depth about like your views on upcycling? I know you did a little bit, but just like how Story might do it, their rendition of upcycling.
I think there are more than two, but for me, there's two main ways. One is that people like find old blankets or old jeans or whatever and make something out of it. And then there's people. Then there's the one which I think is a little bit more cloak and dagger, where people go somewhere where there are fabric rolls and buy the fabric and then use it and then say that it's dead stock, therefore it's more sustainable. I guess it is, but like if there was a spectrum of things, like it's quite, for me, it's like quite low on the spectrum, even though of course it's really good to use things that already exist, and we have done it before. That's, I don't know why, but that seems like it's the lowest rung on the ladder, and it's the one that every brand seems to be reaching for. Like, we only use dead stock, but I mean, what does that mean? It could mean that it was fabric they ordered last year and haven't used yet, and they're using it again. But I don't know, upcycling vintage into stuff. I this is just personal taste, but I just haven't seen anything nice that I liked. To be quite frank with you, it's not my vibe. There was sometimes I think it's really clever. Like there was that company who was taking old Levi's and recutting them to be a more modern fit, and then selling them. And then there was like 9 others that did the same thing. That I think is really clever, because it's Levi's are like Converse and stuff. They're almost like this. They're almost like petrol or money. They're just so much of it in the world. Like, we should use it as a commodity. It's almost like a raw ingredient. But yeah, upcycling, I don't know. Some of it's, again, like you said, that sometimes I see it and I'm like, that's amazing, and sometimes I think that's actually kind of gross. But I still think it's great. I think on the whole, maybe it's just not my vibe, but I think it's really great. We've wanted to do stuff in the past where we upcycle t-shirts that were faulty or something into yarn, and then use that yarn to make jumpers, to like try and close this loop. And I think we will probably do that at some point, because we're just growing a big pile of t-shirts that we can't sell, but have to be used, and we don't necessarily want to turn them into paper. I think that there's probably a lot of great stuff to do with it, as long as it's designed. But it's a very difficult thing, because if you upcycle something out of old materials, you then have to photograph it and market it and sell it. Like, it's very, 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 very high effort, versus something like Story, where we make a sample and then we can like make almost unlimited number of a copy of that thing. So it really has to be a labor of love. There's a dude here in England called Greater Goods. He upcycles mostly like technical equipment into bags and stuff like that. I really like his work. I guess because it's also like a niche thing. I guess that he's found there's just a huge swathe of people like getting prairie style blankets and turning them into jackets, or finding Indian cantha and turning it into hats, etc. I suppose my overriding feeling is that I don't know how you would find something new to do. I guess if you do, it's amazing. But yeah, there was one company, I think they've gone, I'm sorry to ramble. They would remake stuff out of old military, put it all together, and it would be like made up of lots of different panels of fabric, etc. And then they overdyed it in black. They would always overdye it in black. So I guess that was their branding. That was their art direction. And I thought that was very interesting and cool, because you kind of, they're using old stuff as materials, but then their art direction made it their thing. That was quite cool. And then there are people like that. There's embroidery people like I think it's called Bandera or something, who always like embroider over stuff. There's that amazing knitter called Celia Pym who gets old knitwear and darns it, and it's so special and so that brand. Anyone that ever does anything approaching it's like, oh, it just seems like it's Celia Pym again. I've thought about it for a story. We had this is the last thing I'm saying this because I know I'm rambling, but we visited this big warehouse where they sort vintage into bales. I don't know if you've ever seen these places, but like all your vintage all your old clothes usually go to all these sorting facilities. They end up in markets, people buy them, they get sorted and sorted and sorted, and often they end up in these sorting facilities where they get sorted into like A grade, B grade, C grade, whatever t-shirts, 90s t-shirts. And then when we were in this place, they had among like hundreds of bales of old Carhartt, they had hundreds of bales worth of old like sleeping blankets from like the 80s, 90s, just all baled together. And I thought, how amazing it would be just to make like just a bunch of puffer jackets out of that stuff, because there are very few people who are approaching upcycling tend to approach it from the same direction as the thing was made. So making a jacket out of American tile jacket out of American style patchwork is like interesting, but like, I don't know, expected. But making like technical puffer jacket out of an old sleeping bag using those trims and stuff, and upcycling sportswear is something that just doesn't happen very much. But sportswear is so interesting and amazing, and like wears very in its own way, but it doesn't really happen very much. So yeah, that's one thing I would have loved to have done, but we just haven't ever got around to do it. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay. No?
I have one.
Okay.
Also referring to the say, I read all of them before this talk, just to get to know better the story. When you were talking about is the one on being green, and you were talking about these kind of can I say is that the gatekeeping around sustainability, and that there is like a requirement for everybody to know, like for even new designers to know, like, and to be updated with the holy books and texts about sustainable thinking. And how did your process of self-educating started, and where? Because you said you were on linguistics and not from a design education, and
I think I think me and Katie are lucky that we're born into this. Like, I mean, we're probably older than all of you, but we've got some like greater understanding of things. And I'm from Iraq, got a very different view of things. I lived there for a long time, and Katie was from within industry, so it was almost, I think, probably, it's quite hard if you're in industry to know what's right, because you're told constantly. But when we started Story, we didn't really talk about sustainability until I think about 4 years in, because it felt like we would be opening ourselves up to more damage than anything else. We still don't fully understand it, but now we feel a bit more confident in our ability to talk about it. I think I really think that we probably are one of the most progressive, especially, but we've been learning all the time, and this year, I would say, is the year where I've come to terms with or sort of understood our own thinking, because I don't know if everybody really knows what they think. And sometimes it's really hard to know your own taste. Sometimes it's really hard to know your own point of view about stuff. Mine and Katie's is that we are ready and willing to be wrong about stuff, and we have the vocabulary to communicate that the reason I put these essays up is just so that we've got somewhere for people to point to, so that people have some understanding of how we see things, but we are willing to be wrong. And the thing that I see most sharply out there in the very narrow landscape that I have is that people are so reactive to opposing views. Someone says that someone's like, sometimes it's so understandable. Sometimes people are so attacking. We get comments all the time that are extremely like attacking, like, you are doing this wrong, you're actually really harmful, or you guys are actually part of the problem. Okay, fine. On one hand, I want to say to people, that's okay. Like, that's okay if you think that, and you might be right and you might be wrong, and that's okay. Like, but we're just doing this thing. And sometimes I want to tell people, oh, I think that you might have misread. You might not know. It often happens. Like, someone will follow us. I'll see the follow on Instagram, and then I'll see the comment. So it's like an instant reaction, usually about price or something. Usually it's about price. And we just know not to react in anger. Once I have done that, probably about 3 years ago, I was like, wow, you're being a real small brain about this. And of course that discourse just went the wrong direction. The guy was fucked off. And I can see why. We're learning all the time. We're learning not just about sustainability, but about like societal stuff and our own messaging. This is another thing that's really, 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 really hard, because just like when you start and you can't show everybody everything that you do, it's still the same with us. Like, we can only afford to do a couple of photo shoots. They're really expensive. They're really expensive and really time consuming. And we don't always get back what we put into it. So we would love to do a shoot with, I don't know, we would love to do a shoot with something that we've got an opinion about embedded into it, but we don't always get to do it. So sometimes we have to wait. And sometimes I see companies taken down or people taken down long before they've had a chance to really show people what they're about. And one wonderful thing that I think is starting to happen, but also being used, I think, for bad, is when people say from the outset, I'm still learning, or I'm making mistakes, and I acknowledge that I'm not perfect, and this is my working hypothesis. This is what I'm doing at the moment, but I'm willing to change. People respect that boundary. I think you see it with brands who are like, we aren't sustainable, but we're interested in this world, and that instantly takes the pressure off. It's very nice. It's a very nice thing that's happening. Of course, that now means that like big, massive brands are doing these big pieces where they're talking about how bad they are, as if it's wonderful, as if it's this wonderful thing. And I think they can eat shit, to be honest. I think that they shouldn't be using these kinds of things. I think this is, but when you're a small maker, it's a bit of a juggle. How you frame your stuff, and I do feel lucky. Like, I feel like we've learned how to do it quite well. But Katie doesn't like it at all. The reason Katie isn't on this call is she doesn't really like being on camera or talking about stuff off the cuff. Like, she is the type of person who wonderfully likes to have things like sit with her, and I think that's a really powerful thing. Like, if someone asks a question like, how come you've never used a girl who wears a hijab in your shoots? She wants to like sit with that and work it out, instead of like being very reactionary. And that's why she doesn't particularly want to be on something like this, and you've got to respect that kind of thing. And I really love her for that. I've got another friend, just the last thing I'll say on this, I've got a friend who's got this really great t-shirt project, and he's making t-shirt from scratch, and I'm encouraging him to document it and talk about it, and talk about the problems and the solutions and everything, because it's very difficult and it's very time consuming. But once you get to the end of it and someone new comes along, they then have this resource at hand to see where this person has come from. And if he's decided to use a polyester cotton mix, not instantly judge him, and he'll have like something written about it why he's chosen to use that particular thing, and then at least there's a lot of work behind it. But that's not so easy for that guy that I'm talking about. It's not so easy. He doesn't like writing. He doesn't like presenting. So he might need to have some like help from somebody who's better at framing stuff. And I think that's where me and Katie work really well. She doesn't really like writing, but she's actually really great at editing. I really like writing. I sometimes I go too fast and my grammar's pretty shit. But yeah. Does anyone need to leave? I don't want to hold anyone up.
I could listen to you talk for hours.
I did have a question since we're talking about Katie. Do you have any advice on working with your partner?
People ask that all the time. I think that we're probably just really lucky that we both have got like compatible personalities, and we started the company like a year into us being together, so it's part of our relationship. But still, we have we're still different people. You got to just respect each other, because at different times, like the one thing that happens with work, which is undeniable, which is unshakable, is that you make a thing and then you show someone and they're like, oh, I don't like that. And it's like, oh no, it's so painful sometimes. It's so painful. And that particular problem happens much worse with Katie, like, and for good reason. Like sometimes she'll spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on a technical drawing of a pant or something, and I'll be like, that's kind of horrible actually. And then so yeah, I have to measure how we do stuff, but we also want to be honest with each other. And then conversely, I get so upset. I get so upset sometimes especially if our communication's not working very well. Like sometimes I'll say something like, okay, we're using brown tape for these boxes, and she'll be like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'll do, this is such a weird example, but I'll like go and research brown tape, and I'll find the best brown tape, and I'll buy samples, and I'll check all the samples, and I'll do this whole like process over several weeks or days or hours, and then I'll put brown tape on the bag, and she'll be like, why is it brown? I'll be like, because you said we're doing brown tape. She's like, I never said that. And I get so fucking upset. Or when we're working with shoes or something, it's really, I guess you gotta accept that you're going to be really upset, and that you're also different people and have different approaches, because we just do. Like I said, Katie has a different way of working to me. I'm pretty much only mentally useful for the first like hour and a half of the day. Like I get up and I can do emails and stuff, and then after that I'm just a lurching body. I can like pack orders and move boxes around and do bits and pieces, but everything else is useless. Whereas Katie is like all day long, and then she can just go to sleep. Like she'll be like, okay, time for bed, and then she goes to sleep, and I'm just like lying in bed with my eyes open. If we talk about something stressful, I'm just thinking about it over and over and over and over and over and over. So we had to have a discussion about that a lot of times, about how we have to stop working at 6, or how can we not talk about shipments during breakfast, etc. But yeah, I guess so. You guys are working together on the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are.
That's going to be so. Yeah, and then of course a book is so much like the kind of thing we do, because you then have to send it off for review, and then you're going to get people's opinions about stuff. Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah.
I hope you don't mind that we'll be including you and your thoughts. I just really loved it and really resonated.
No, of course, that's fine. Of course.
Thank you. And also your Instagram captions, both yours and Katie's, it creates kind of this epic love story, just riddled with pride. I love it.
Oh, just me making fun of Katie.
Making fun of, but just incredibly in love with her.
that isn't a marketing thing that we do, but it has sort of become one. Not that it's done anything any good for the brand, but I'm an introvert, for sure, and Katie is an extrovert, and would find that at these shows that I would be very quiet. I warm up to people very slowly. But when people have followed me on Instagram and then they come to the show or they meet me, I guess they feel like they know me, and they kind of do because they've been following our stuff a lot. And it really helps actually with a lot of anxiety and like social things, because people are like, oh, the Instagram that you did about Kate this morning is really funny, and like, oh, great, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's genuine.
Cool.
Thank you.
It's genuinely mean, but she really, really likes it. A lot. She really likes it, and we do really love each other a lot. It's the most important part. I will say about like the last thing about working with your partner. If the brand ever got in the way of our relationship, we would drop the brand like instantly, for sure. Like it's just clothes. Our relationship is more important, and I think it holds us together a lot. Yeah, it's sometimes the things that make it work for us are things that people say it shouldn't. Like, it makes it work for us to work from home. We've tried working elsewhere, but it doesn't. The dynamic doesn't work. It works for us to not have boundaries sometimes and have boundaries other times. It makes it work for us to like have like joint sign off on stuff and silo other things. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Anything else? No. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, never.
No, go for it. I feel like
it's a quick question though. I just when you're approaching a manufacturer or someone in the 1% of time that they do respond, do you have any suggestions on like how to approach someone in an effective way? Because I don't know.
I didn't hear the question properly.
Oh, like, so you email someone to ask about a manufacturing thing, or you're trying to make a connection and establish a relationship with someone, but just like, how do you approach that?
It's been very rare that that's worked, but I think there's no substitute for, I mean, this is the worst time in the world to say this, but there's no substitute for meeting somebody. I think I really think you have to. It just humanizes the whole thing. You'll find that things work much better. I think doing stuff over email and over the phone, even I can't phone people. I've got quite major phone anxiety. I hate speaking to people on the phone. But there's no it's like walking through honey trying to get stuff done over email, and you'll get forgotten about because people will be there in person. So I think going in person, I think that most of the time the emails look something like, hi, I'd love to do this. Is this something you can do? And then like several follow-ups, and then they'll say, yes, it is something you can do. And I'll be like, right, fantastic. Do you think I could come visit? And then it goes from there, because there's been times where we've like, can we send a sample? And then they can make it, whatever. I think that's where a lot of people work, but it doesn't work for us. And also, I mean, from like an ethical thing, I really want to like look into the whites of people's eyes. I would say probably now half of the people we've met, double the amount of people than we work with, especially with natural dyes. There's a lot of like fake stuff going on, and untruth and stuff. So you really have to go and see. And like I said, I think that you'll see for yourself if you've got to convince yourself that, there's been times where we've gone and everything's right, but then the dude or the girl there is kind of an asshole, and you don't want to work with them.
Yeah.
Where are you? Do you say you're in LA?
I'm in California. No, I'm in the Bay Area.
Oh, okay. When we started, I wished we were in America, because there's so much manufacturing. around. I won't say their names, but there's a couple of people that I know that have companies and they live out there and they make everything. They just like get in a van and they go from the factory to the dye house to their own place and they pack and sell everything. There seems like there's a massive amount of like untapped opportunity there, and the thing that's happening there, the factories there have like mirror what happens in the UK. Whenever we went to the factories in the UK, they would always say we used to make for, and it would be like Marks and Spencers usually, or and they would all gone abroad. I think in America the same sort of things happened, especially as like these big retailers closing. There's going to be a lot of small, still like really small, like as you guys call it, like mom and pop shops that used to make like t-shirts for Nordstrom or something, and they've lost the contract and would love to work with you and do something. I think there's a lot, especially with like jersey and stuff, and there'll be so much leftover material, etc. there. Yeah, I think that it's worth just like going and visiting factories. The guy that I know in LA said that he would like go to a factory and they would say, can you do this? And they would say no, and he would like, do you know anyone that can? And he just went place to place to place to place till he eventually found a place. Because sometimes it'll be like more tied to like a community of people. I think that he said that in his case there was like this Korean lady who was making it for him, and then her aunt had another factory, and then it turned out to be that aunt's sister who had a different one who was able to do the thing, and it was like all well connected. Yeah,
it's like
I think
building bridges to networks that are different than yours or outside of your
own. There is all these factories have got sub networks. You'll also find that they're not as adversarial as people think. Like a lot of factories like other factories and like share loads with them. So if you ask for some help, often they'll be like, yeah, check out these guys down the road. They're actually in the back of a toy shop. And that's literally happened to us one time. Actually, we were looking to make hats somewhere, and the guy was like, okay, go around the block. There's a teddy bear shop. At the back of the teddy bear shop is a bucket hat manufacturer. But yeah, I wonder. I don't know how you find manufacturers. I still don't know how. We wanted to make shoes recently. We did, but we only found that through an agent. And when you're small, you can't work with an agent because they don't want to. They make their money on quantities, so they're not going to answer your emails either. Yeah.
Thank you.
Depressing end. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you all email me your addresses, if you're comfortable with it, I'll send you out the envelope with some swag from the warehouse for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope you have a good day. I'm going to go and have some burgers now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.